So I'm very happy to introduce, for the first time, that pedal show live. Give them a hand.
Thank you very, very much. We don't speak Danish, obviously. For that we apologise. So we'll try and speak as clearly as possible, and if we're going too fast or you can't understand, please just let us know and we'll try and be more clear.
What did you say after?
This is going to work. Yeah, this is going to work really well. More playing. So yeah, hello, I'm Mick, obviously, this is Dan, and we run that pedal show, which has just been taken us all by surprise. Dan, maybe you might want to just explain a little bit about how we came to be.
So Mick and I have been friends for many years. I own a company called The Gig Rig, and we make guitar stuff. And I met Mick years ago when he was working for a magazine. And we, became friends, and over the years we'd just talk about gear. And we were in NAMM 2 years ago, and I was, because Mick's been fantastic throughout the years for advice with the business. Because I'm good at making guitar stuff, but Mick's been invaluable. Anyway. We'd sit down, we'd start to talk about business, and that would last 30 seconds, and then we'd just be talking about gear for hours and hours and hours.
Same as you guys.
Exactly the same as, yeah, exactly. Because that's what we're passionate about. And then Mick said, this is what we should put on YouTube. We'd just film us talking about gear. And that was it. So we started on the Gig Rig channel a couple of years ago, and sorry, not even that, 18 months ago, and then in January this year, we started our own That Pedal Show channel, and last week we just hit 50,000 subscribers, which has been amazing, and 2.5 million views, which is
it's crazy. It's small in YouTube land, but it's big in guitar land. So to everyone who watches and who subscribes, thank you very much.
Thank you, yeah.
The whole point of That Pedal Show, I think all of us as guitar players have endless questions, and we're all looking for the answer. How do I sound better? What pedal should I buy? What amp should I use? And Dan and my stance on that is there are no answers. There are only better questions. And it's all a journey, and it will never end. So we just start there and keep going. And hopefully through the show, our job is to try and maybe shortcut through some of the things that we all experience all the time, and just get to the point where it's a little bit easier to know maybe what pedal's going to work with what amp, maybe better choices for amps and guitars, just get you a little bit more quickly to that point where you want to be, and that point is always evolving. So that's it, there are no answers, only better questions. So hopefully we'll have a load of questions today, and I think the way this will work best is if it's interactive and you guys tell us what you want to hear. The absolute best case scenario is that this is a life-changing event for you. And you go home newly enlightened with a whole new take on guitar. The worst case scenario is that you just feel inspired enough to go home, plug in your guitar and get some new sounds. So that's what we're hoping to achieve. So let's, do you mind if I just ask you guys a question? So how many of you guys own no pedals at all? There's always one.
Drummers.
Between 1 and 5 pedals, 5 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 plus.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good.
Yeah. Okay. Just so we can see who's here. And how many of you guys gig out with a band?
Wicked.
Good proportion. And those of you who play at home, predominantly? Great, good. That just helps us understand a little bit about maybe some of the questions that will come up. And finally, music tastes. Classic rock, blues, jazz, metal. Oh, more than I was expecting. Yeah. Okay, so Dan and I don't really do much on metal. It's not really our thing. This kind of works for metal, but it's not the ideal thing. So the point of that is to say that we're predominantly in the whole kind of, as you know, classic rock, blues, roots world. So that's kind of what we focus on.
How many pedals do you have?
I actually don't know. Not as many as him.
Okay, so about 2 years ago, I don't like the thought of being a collector of pedals. Every pedal that I have does something specific. It does something better than something else. About 2 years ago, I went to my garage and I pulled out a whole bunch of pedals that I knew I wasn't going to use anymore. And I sold 150 pedals on eBay. Which left me with... No, it was, yeah. And since we've been doing the show, that number has crept up and up and up, and I'm going to have a cull again soon. But I don't do eBay under my own name. If you look for that pedal dude on eBay, you might find a bargain. But anyway, lots and lots. But the pedal thing for me, so it came about, I was a professional guitar player in Sydney in Australia, and I didn't have cool parents who listened to Led Zeppelin, and I didn't grow up on those classic rock sounds. The first rock album I heard was 1984, Van Halen, and listening to Steve Vai, and I had no idea about gear, but I just thought that state of the art had to be the best. If it's new, a new model of something, surely that meant it had to sound better. And I had racks of gear, and I sounded like a wasp in a bottle. And I was working with a producer in Sydney, and he had this box of old rusty effects pedals. And I thought, this is, what on earth is he doing? Does he not see this shiny thing before him? And then he pulled out an old Electric Mistress, the green script logo Electric Mistress. And I plugged that in to a blackface Fender Deluxe, and my life was forever changed. I couldn't believe that this box I was playing through, that then was 30 years old.
And probably didn't work properly.
Yeah, and it was noisy, but there was something about it that connected with me that I'd never experienced before. And so I got my credit card out that day. I went down to Guitar Crazy in Coogee and just bought a bunch of stuff, and just haven't looked back. I've just find them so completely inspiring. Just the character and the combinations, and that really was what led me to the start of the gig rig, because I had racks and I could press one button and get the sound, not a great sound, but it was the combination of effects I wanted, and I couldn't do that with effects pedals, so that led me to start the whole gig rig thing and designing the switcher. But yeah, so effects have been a very big part of my life for a long time.
Okay, so Dan and I spoke about what topics we might try and cover today, and obviously, if you've watched the show, you'll know we could talk about an hour about this much. So we thought we'd kick off with 2 questions, and then that will spur discussion, and you guys will want to ask various things, and if we can demonstrate, we will. So the first question is, what order should my effects go in? Because that's the question that everyone's got, right? Is everyone still basically struggling with that question? What order do my pedals go in?
No, these guys are sorted.
No, because you're all sorted.
That's amazing.
Okay, so maybe we can go through this pretty quick. So are we all... anyone here use a compressor? Where do you put it? In front? Yeah, great. Overdrives next. Modulations next, depending on the modulation. Some vintage overdrives. Dan likes the aforementioned Electric Mistress before overdrive.
Mm-hmm. Before everything.
Reverbs and delays.
Yeah, so reverb and delays at the end. It's fun swapping the order of reverbs and delays as well, just because it gives you a different experience. Delay is a really interesting one, as in where it goes. Now, I'm assuming most of you guys put delay at the end of your signal chain?
Yes.
Okay, so.
Right, okay, so we've got 2 amps today. We've been very kindly lent this beautifully well sorted 50 watt plexi and a pro reverb, and they're arranged like this because they don't hurt you guys. We try to get them loud enough to sound okay, but not so loud that it hurts everybody. So if it needs to be louder, please say. If it needs to be quieter, please don't say anything.
Okay, so the 2 amps together. Now. That Marshall is just killing. All right, so if you're used to having delay on after an overdrive pedal, you might be used to.
He designed it.
Okay, so. So what's happening there is the delay is getting the full force of the overdrive. And it's a sound that I'm sure you're all familiar with. It's very easy to play under the fingers and it sounds nice.
What overdrive is that?
That's the Janray.
Yeah, Vimera Janray, everyone familiar with that pedal? It's kind of a bit like a Timmy, it just does lots and lots of things. It's just a very, can do mid-push, can do full range,
Yeah, it's lovely, really lovely. Okay, so that was overdrive into delay. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to swap the order. I'm going to put delay into overdrive so you can hear the difference. So I play. If you play.
Fender putting
I know, it's incredible.
Does it sound okay? Can you guys hear clearly? Yeah, good.
Okay, so here's the standard order that most of us use, okay? This is overdrive into delay. This is delay into overdrive.
Delay's much more prominent, further forward in the mix, a little bit messier.
Yeah.
Quite a big difference.
It's a massive difference. Have you guys heard of an artist called Stephen Wilson, Porcupine Tree?
Yeah.
So I did his rig a couple of years ago, and he uses these Bad Cat amplifiers, and he has them cranked. They sound amazing, but he never uses an effects loop. He always puts everything right in the front. And we were playing around with it, and he loved the sound of the delay just punching into this really overdriven amplifier. So I started messing with the pedal order and trying the delay before the overdrive. And then I did a great band in England called Biffy Clyro that I've been working with. And he has his Boss metal zone and the delay before the metal zone. And I'm like, this is never going to work. This is just going to be a mess. And I tell you what, it sounds ace. So I wanted to just play that, just to maybe let you guys think, to challenge your preconceived ideas, because it can make a huge difference, just the way that it feels under the fingers. Yes, it can be messy and not as controlled, but that is not necessarily a bad thing. It's all about context. If you're doing a sort of Dave Gilmour style, really smooth thing, maybe that's not the way to go. But if you're after something that's got a bit more character and a bit more manic, it's going to be a really fantastic thing to try.
delay. Okay, so I guess we don't need to do too much on pedal order then, because everyone seems pretty up together with that. And as you will know, it's start with the basics and then move stuff around. So probably a chewier question, which probably plagues most of us, is what overdrive pedal should I buy? I'm going to make a guess that most pedal fans here have got more overdrives than they have other things, overdrives, fuzzers and distortions. Is that true? Yeah, okay. And so the biggest problem with that is you're always wondering, what's the next thing? I've had a revelation just recently. Never ever liked valve overdrive pedals because of the way they react on the board, and just they don't really sit with things in the same way that a transistor pedal does. And we've come across these Page tube pedals which work really well, but we'll get onto that in a sec. So we're just going to run through some different overdrive types and some of the things we've got on the board today into the 2 amps, just to kind of hammer home the point that the pedal itself doesn't sound like anything. It has no sound. All the pedal is there to do, obviously, is to interact between your guitar and your amp, and whatever amp you're using just makes a radical difference to how that pedal sounds. So I guess we've all been on forums where there's been a discussion going on saying, oh, you know, this pedal sounds great, this pedal sounds like shit, this is the worst pedal I've ever heard, this is the best pedal I've ever heard, which of course is all rubbish, because the context is, what amp are you plugging into? In what environment are you playing? And I think there's quite a lot of pedals that get a bad rap because they're not suited to certain amps. So we've got a Fender and a Marshall, we've got a bunch of different pedals, so let's just have a listen and see what happens, shall we?
Okay.
And please, if you've got questions or you want something clarifying or whatever, just yell out and that's the way it'll work best.
So I'll be making many trips to the floor during the show. Just
We should put it on the table.
Okay, so if you want to play, Mick. Okay. So this is the Marshall by itself.
It's unbelievable.
It's incredible. You have a guy here that mods these Marshalls.
It's my nephew who's just down here.
Okay, he is a genius. He is a genius. This is one of, if not the best sounding Marshall I've ever heard. It's incredible.
And this one's set, we might push it a little bit. Hello, Greg.
There he is.
We might
push it
a little bit in a sec, but at the moment there's not much. It's not breaking up at all.
Creamy, juicy, woody, smoky texture.
Insert adjectives here. Yeah. Okay, so that's the Marshall, and then the Fender is. So Fender, I don't know what you're hearing out there, but what I'm hearing here is kind of less strong in the mid-range, a bit more extended bass, and what I'm feeling under the fingers is less attack. It's softer.
Flair.
Yeah, insert more adjectives here.
Okay, so if we look at the Page, shall we do the Page?
Yeah, so the Page is a tube boost, and this is the what he calls the ODS version. ODS referring to the fabled Dumble Overdrive Special, lest we get into that. But it doesn't work like that on its own. On its own, it's just a basic boost pedal.
This is without the Page, and this is with the Page.
Nice, full frequency, plenty of everything getting pushed quite nicely there. So not a typical overdrive pedal in that, yes, it has an EQ curve, but it's not doesn't, it's not like a tube screamer where it's really pushing those mids or a fuzz where it's really fuzzing up. So it's just a good all-round OD, and I think for guys who don't want to change the character of the amp too much, but just get that little bit more, that little elusive thing that we're all looking for. Don't want to change my core tone too much, but just want to push it. Something like that I think works really well.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the Fender, was it?
No, that was the Marshall.
That was Marshall.
Yep, same thing as the Fender.
Feels more compressed.
Mm-hmm.
Both amps.
Beautiful.
Tell you what's interesting about this, right? And I think it's almost true of vintage guitars as well. Well-sorted old amps don't sound as different as new amps. The difference between never put drinks on amps, people.
That's fizzy as well.
Yeah,
that's going to be awesome.
It's going to be great in 2 minutes. And maybe because the Marshall's not compressing. Can we just push it a bit and see what happens?
Is everyone okay if we just turn the Marshall up a little bit?
Yes. Yeah.
Just to get into a bit more classic Marshall territory. See, it's not breaking up that much.
Okay.
The joys of E flat and a Telecaster, eh?
So now if I put the page into the Marshall like that.
Lest we forget that playing the guitar loud is the best thing you can ever do. Yeah, so the more of the amp's character kind of comes into play a bit there when we're starting to push it. Obviously, that has a practical knock-on. Not all of us can play that loud at the wedding gig next weekend. But yeah, so the pedal's doing a very different job into the Marshall style amp. I mean, it's a really obvious thing to say, but sometimes that penny doesn't drop until you hear it.
This will make the difference really stark, okay? So that was this lovely valve overdrive, real natural compression, clips in a really warm, smooth way. We're going to do the same thing now with a fuzz.
Roadies!
Okay. The lovely guys downstairs at Effect Peddler have lent me this fuzz, and it's not going back to them. It's amazing. Right, so
The thing is, how many years have you been doing this?
I know.
And he goes downstairs and he picks up a pedal and he comes back and goes, mate, this is the most amazing thing I've ever heard.
Okay, so amp by itself. Now with the fuzz.
Check me out.
Really, really great. Okay, so what's happening there is, let me just play this. So this is the Fender. Same pedal into the Fender. Marshall. So.
Let me have it.
Okay, all right. Okay, into the Marshall.
And it cleans up really nice off the volume block.
Okay, now the Fender. Right, so what's happening there is, because the Marshall's turned up, the valves have this wonderful natural compression and natural clipping. It's very warm and very soft, and it creates these harmonics that our ears really like. So, for example, this amp running at this level, if we put a transistor amp or a PA or something running at the same level, it would be a very different experience. Now, just, we can actually stand in front of these Marshalls for a while, and it's really pleasing. But with the Fender, what you're hearing, because there's so much more headroom in the Fender, the really sharp edges of the fuzz, if you see a fuzz signal in an oscilloscope, it has these square edges. And what's happening is, with the Fender, with so much more headroom, it's picking up the edges really clearly, and it gives a very different experience. Whereas in the Marshall, those edges get smoothed over. So, as you dig in more, the fuzz is working in conjunction with the amplifier to give you a very different experience. Which is, so this is just to go on to say, when you're choosing your fuzz, your overdrive pedal, it's depending on what it's going into, it's chalk and cheese. It's such a different thing.
Question there?
What fuzz is it?
Oh, the fuzz. Okay, so this is
It came from.
so it's from Basic Audio. It's called a Soul of Myth. It's just spectacular.
Yeah, it's a silicon. Any fuzz fans in? People who like fuzz? Great, that's more than normal, because usually fuzz is one of those things where it takes that first, like so many things in life, it takes that first life-changing experience. Because, you plug in, you buy a cheap fuzz face or whatever, and you plug it into a high headroom Fender amp, and it just sounds like the worst thing you've ever heard. And then one day something happens and you actually get to put it into a crank plexi and you go, that's what that means. And of course, the other thing with fuzz is it's probably even more massive and varied than Overdrive, with all this, everything from ZVEX to all the more crazy stuff. Obviously you've got fuzz face as kind of the beginning, tone benders and big muffs, and they all sound very different, and there are all 80 versions of each of those. So it's a rabbit hole down which some of you guys who had your hands up are a long way down, I would imagine.
It's bottomless. I get to the end of that. I'm sticking with my Pharaoh until that thing's going with me into my grave. But
and what's that? What's that based on?
It's a tweaked Big Muff with the tone circuit heavily modified. It doesn't have the scoop, so you can actually hear it when you're playing with other people. That's quite brilliant.
It's no small feat for a Big Muff. That's very cool.
And it has loads of bottom end. I mean, I use it for bass, and I tune to G sharp at the moment.
Right.
So it works really well for that.
That's stuff you can feel and not hear, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we have a lot of dogs around the rehearsal space that sort of get scared.
So bottom end is a really interesting thing. And look, we've got like 15 minutes left, so I'm going to try and make this as short as possible. We've gone through none of the stuff. But anyway,
we said, how on earth are we going to fit it into 45 minutes? 45 hours, we'd be doing it again.
So bottom end in pedals, so you heard with the fuzz, there's a lot of bottom end in there, and into the Fender. So the Fender clean by itself. Just switch me on for a sec. Now the Fender's got a lot of bottom end, but it's not. That's the sound of the Fender that we like, you know. But when you put the fuzz on, there's so much bottom end in there. So in actual fact, that sound, and that's cool, but you do that with a band, and you're gone. You're out of the mix completely. Whereas, so what the Marshall does, the Marshall has this really sweet mid-range, but it actually shelves off some of the bottom end. You listen to those classic rock sounds like Eddie Van Halen and the Free stuff. And you isolate those guitar tracks, there's almost no bottom end, right? So which is why when the fuzz goes into the Marshall, man, it's just so good. Okay, so
you can't do that with him in the room?
Right, so the point is this.
I was turning the bass up and down then, which you probably heard. Marshall, passive volume, passive tone stack, doesn't make a huge amount of difference when the thing's open.
So let's do this now. I'm going to put on a pedal that has loads of mid-range and not the bottom end. I'm going to put that into the Fender for a completely different thing.
What's this?
We'll do the clone.
Okay, so we've got a clone, which is the closest one we've heard. They're all good, but this is... Just taking a bit of bottom end away from the Fender there because it was starting to hurt. There we are, starting to hurt. That's what happens with smaller Fenders when you really kick them hard, as you will know. Just with the clonny off a minute. So you can hear how there you've got your, you know, that lovely Fender mid-scoopy clean sound that we all love. And then the reason people like clones so much, as anyone who's got one will know, is that it fills in that mid-range, like such.
Juicy goodness.
And it allows your Strat to just be a little bit nicer, you know.
So without the clong?
Actually, it's still nice and bouncy, isn't it? It's not a typical Marshall sound.
No.
Anyone hearing kind of slightly more aggression there, a bit more mid, slightly more rocky, bridge pickup? Bearing in mind these are vintage style Strat pickups. Fender.
So because there's so much more headroom again, you're hearing the overdrive from the pedal and nothing else, but what you're hearing in the Marshall is the combination of the overdrive from the amp that's being pushed by the overdrive from the clon. It's really, really very cool.
And a totally different upper mid. You know, once you get into the band, that difference in the upper mid frequencies there is absolutely everything, because you'd be struggling to hear that defined getting out over the cymbals and everything else that's happening, whereas the Marshall's just got that sizzly, more presence thing happening. So I guess a very quick demonstration yet again that different pedals really do sound so radically different into different amps. So you have to buy loads of amps as well as loads of pedals.
So we've got 9 minutes left. Is any questions thus far? Here we go.
Regarding that whole mid-bump thing and the Fenders and the buzzers and what have you, have you tried the low gainy overdrive into the fuzz?
Oh yeah.
Gain stacking is a whole other world which everyone in this room hopefully does lots of and really loves. You know,
Speaking of rabbit holes.
Exactly. It's endless, and not only EQ wise but impedance wise, the way that they work with each other. It's once you start that, you can find some incredible combinations. Like I didn't bring one here, but so the Kingsley page, if you put a treble booster into the page, it is just ray of sunshine and delight, and all the problems in the world simply vanish, and it's just delightful.
If you haven't tried it and you have a less gainy and a more gainy pedal, try them both ways around. If you've got the more gainy pedal second and you boost that with the less gainy pedal, what will happen is obviously you get more compression, more overdrive. Nothing really gets much louder. If you put them the other way around, you put the gainy pedal first and the less gainy pedal second. That's going to give you the kind of headroom kick and more volume into the amp, assuming the amp can take it. So I'm guessing everyone's tried that, hopefully.
Yeah. Okay. Any other? Yes, sir.
Can you make the Fender amp sound more like the Marshall if you crank it up a bit more?
So
because I have a Fender and the Marshall sounds great.
Yeah. So it's something that we've been trying to do for years. The problem is that when you crank the Fender up, because the inherent amount of bottom end and the way that it takes a lot more energy to produce lower end frequencies, and to amplify them to that sort of level. So even with the bass sometimes completely dialed out, it's still a sub. It's a really strange thing. But let us not forget that the first Marshall is basically a copy of a Fender Bassman.
Yeah, I know.
So when we're talking Fenders and Marshalls, we really,
it's such a wide gamut.
Yeah.
But this is a pro reverb, 70s pro reverb.
Mm-hmm.
I've turned down the master a bit. I've turned up the input gain.
Yeah.
Turned the bass off. It's never really does it in the same way. Is there a pedal on there?
No, that's just...
Try fuzz.
So the answer to your question is no.
But it depends absolutely on the Fender amp, because if you've ever been lucky enough to plug into a really nice old Bassman or any of that, the tweed end of Fender, then you get...
Yeah.
It's a little more in that in that ballpark. But as you come into the 60s and anything with the black face, where you get the mid-scoop Bakesfield thing, you know, that really classic sound, it's much harder. And sure, there are pedals that can help you get there. A lot of the amp Marshall in the box.
How about an Angry Charlie?
Yeah,
So
great.
we have those sort of pedals they call MIB or Marshall in a box.
Yeah.
And they work really well into amplifiers that have clean headroom. You know, they're designed to mimic some of the characteristics of the Marshall. And there's some. Tell you what, I mean, we are living in a golden age of pedals because this, honestly, I mean, I walk downstairs and I come up with that fuzz, and I walked like 5 feet into the guitar show, and it's just like, oh, there's that one, and there's, you know, there is so much great stuff out there. It really is, you know, there's so much information available now to pedal builders that there really is no excuse for designing something less than awesome, really. So Marshall and box type pedals can get you really close. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Yeah. Do you have some tips for reducing hum when using the effects loop? Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So
No hum in here.
effects loops.
Dan's favourite subject.
Man. Every amplifier is different. So basically, for you guys who don't know, an effects loop in an amplifier, you've got a preamp, which is where your guitar signal goes into and it gets amplified. And then that goes into the power amp, where it takes that little amplified signal and amplifies it much more so it can then drive the speakers. The preamp, the effects loop, is a little split between the preamp and the power amp. So if you're using the overdrive from your amp, what Mick did before, he turned the master volume down, turned the gain up, and you got a crunchy sound. Let's imagine for a second that you like that sound, and you wanted to have that with some delay after it. Well, what the effects loop does is it sends that signal, you know, and then you can plug that into a delay and then that back into the amplifier. Here's the problem with effects loops. They're all different. They all have different impedances on the effects end and on the effects return. And what that means is, lots of the time they are very affected by cable length, because cables have what's called capacitance in them. And the capacitance is a very important part of your guitar sound. You know, absolutely. I spent a lot of time just ABing cables because I'm a nerd. But the difference is incredible. And originally when the effects loops came out in the 80s, a lot of the Bradshaw switching, the rigs that he would do for big artists, there were racks and the amps were right next to the racks, so it was fine just to split that point and you have a short cable going from the preamp to the rack and then back in. What happens now though, pedal boards is just so awesome that people want to run back to the board, and because inevitably they're going to be longer cables, so those cables have a problem. Not only that, you also are adding different connections to earth when you do that. So what I mean by that is you're plugging your the effects end to your pedals and then back, and then your guitar into the pedals. And so lots of times you're joining the earth between the front of the amplifier and the back of the amplifier. Lots of amplifiers have a thing called a star ground, and it makes it so the idea is that all the earth points come to one point. When you start adding different earth points, that's sometimes you can get hum. So if you do get hum, try isolating with an isolating transformer the signal between the send and the return of the amplifier. Sometimes you don't need it, but sometimes just isolating the send of the amplifier will work really well. But also try putting a buffer sat on top of the amplifier, so the effect send from the amp goes into the buffer, and that will drive the cable, so you don't get that tone loss. Has anyone here ever really struggled to get an effects loop working? Anyone here? No? Okay, there we go. Well, that was for you two then. Anyway, hope that was helpful.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome.
You have any more questions? Hello?
I'm not sure if you have the answer, but my problem is I live in an apartment and a lot of other people are neighbors and stuff. And I tried to buy a to have
headphones, yeah.
But it's still really loud. And then I saw there was like a silent
Silent guitar?
Yeah, so you're supposed to get the sound in the
Sure.
cables, right?
So you're saying acoustically it's still too loud?
No, electric.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is it too loud for you, or is it too loud for your neighbours?
I haven't really tried to, make it the full sound, but I think it's still too loud what I have in electric guitar, because I would like to that it's able to plug in and work loud in another place than at home.
Sure.
Okay. Home, right?
So
yeah.
You've just asked the question that lies at the heart of all guitar players' problems. It's the problem we all have, because
Neighbours.
yeah. Yeah, because murder's not allowed anymore.
To be silent in that way, and then be loud in another
Yeah.
environment.
And
A guitarist can practice more if it's possible.
sure.
Yeah.
The unfortunate answer is there is no solution, because it's about context, and it's the same as we're playing loud here. I guess not many of us get to play at this kind of volume, even at gigs nowadays, because how it is. You have to have very low stage volumes and all the rest of it. So, and as the volume goes up, everything changes. The dynamic response of the amplifier and the guitar changes. The frequencies involved in that sound change completely, and it's one reason why kind of home-based, consumer-focused entry-level products, digital modelling amps and digital modelling effects and things like that, have a totally different EQ structure and why they sound so different. So there is definitely a crossover point where you could have a small amp and probably use it at a small performance and mic it up and it sound okay. But in my view anyway, you're better off getting something that works at home, so an iPad app, or something inexpensive like that, where you can just maybe plug into your phone and get some good sounds. Yamaha THR, those kind of things. The little Fender digital modelings, the entry level ones of those are fantastic. But the minute you try and put that into a live performance situation, it just gets more difficult.
But then you can have both, if you need it, right?
Yeah, you should always have more amps.
No, but are you talking about using headphones?
That's the law.
Yeah, it was like you can be silent in other places than in your earbuds at home, and then switch when you go out to practice. You can practice.
I've got so many great stories about
You can practice your fingers without it.
I get it. So what are you saying, that you lose a little bit of the feel and the inspiration because it's not loud enough?
No, the problem is it's too loud, so
Right.
I cannot give it all and I cannot relax because I try to not disturb, So like it would be nice if you could just
These guys here with the Marshalls have to understand
the attenuator. It's amazing.
Yeah. I personally, I would look at a solution for playing at home and something else for.
Yeah, because it's like I don't like noise all the time. So if it's like we're gonna go at war, that is a situation I don't want. So
I mean, I don't actually play the guitar at home because it's not possible to do so because my neighbours would kill me. So.
Okay, I think
I think I have a good solution for that, because I have bought myself a very small mixer and I have an effects loop on my Overdrive Deluxe. So you just take the signal out from that into the mixer, into the headphones.
Great.
Then I can crank the preamp and I can use all my pedals, and it's only in my headphones. So
How do you stop the hot rod being loud? Just by having it turned right down?
No, I unplug the speaker. I unplug the speaker simply. So I just take.
Yeah, I'm going to say, have you got some sort of load on there? Are you?
Yeah. See, this is the thing.
I do. You have a separate plug that you just put in there.
Yeah.
So
there are ways
you
of
can
things.
disconnect the speaker. Yes, I do that. But the idea is to take it from the effects loop into a mixer, and then you have a headphone. Because these kind of amplifiers normally don't have a headphone out.
No.
I'll give you a little trick. Anyone here that wants to try being really quiet at home with their rig, if you do have an effects loop in, plug a compressor into the effects loop, and then turn the volume down on the compressor and turn the compression up. And what that will do, it mimic the way that the output valves compress, but you also get this master volume. and that can work really, really well. Still got me booted out of my old apartment, but it's better than nothing. I think we have to
Yeah, we are out of time.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
We are out of time. So, okay, we could have kept going for 8 hours. Thank you so much for...
Thank you, guys.
Guys, quick selfie. Here we go. Whoa.